Namaskar. I Shambhavi welcome you all to your channel Galactic Echoes. So let's start exploring the wisdom of Vedic astrology. So today we'll be doing the video about all the signs, all the 12 signs placed in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. So basically we'll be talking about your Navamsa rising, but the topic would be concerning your spouse's personality. How will we decode this particular personality of your spouse? It is through the sign which is falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa. You see, so if for example if you are an Aries rising, so Libra sign is falling there, what this Libra sign would do manifest as in the personality of your spouse, their behavior, their responses and their perspective in the marriage is something which we will try to figure it out here today. And this video is specifically related to your D9, that is Navamsa chart, because the 7th house of the Navamsa tells us about this personality of the spouse, approach he or she will be taking regarding this marriage with you. But the 7th house of the D1 sets the whole theme for your married life. So you know the D1 chart is more concerning to you only, your life themes, your life patterns. So basically the 7th house of D1 is more related to the pattern you would see in your married life, versus the 7th house of the Navamsa is related to specifically your spouse's personality, whatever personality traits they will be carrying in themselves, in their personality, in their physique, in their mannerism, is something which we decode from the Navamsa chart and the 7th house. So the basic foundation for the Navamsa chart regarding your spouse, how will you understand your spouse, starts with the sign, and then we would move further with the planets placed in the 7th house, with the planets placed in the 7th house with a sign, in a particular sign. All of these things we will discuss in upcoming videos. So let's start this video and let's dive in. So first of all, if you have Aries sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, what does it mean is that you are a Libra rising in your D9 Navamsa, right? So with the Aries sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa D9 chart will tell you that the spouse is going to be, they would be carrying a kind of an impulsive personality. They would be the achiever, they would be the initiators in everything in your married life. Like after you get married, this is the person who is nudging you to come out of your comfort zone. They will be the person who would want to start something. So if you say that there's a plumbing issue in the house, they would be the one to quickly call the plumber and resolve that issue in your household. So basically they are the people who are going to take charge of maximum of the domestic chores, because this is the Aries sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa. Moreover, the thing is that go-getter kind of a personality is very important in them, and they would also be aggression oriented kind of a personality. So they would be very particular about their own family, specifically you. So if you are going on a trip or somewhere, if you are in a public sphere, they would make sure that you are not disrespected in any manner if the Mars is well placed. If the Mars is not well placed, this could also manifest as anger mismanagement, which you would be suffering through because of them. So Mars's placement is very important, which you have to check to know if their anger is manifesting in a positive way or in a negative way. Moreover, with this particular sign in the 7th house, it is important that you check the placement of Jupiter and Mercury in your D1 chart and in your D9 chart also, because Jupiter and Mercury, wherever they are placed in whatever sign in the Navamsa, it will tell you the exact personality and the profession your spouse would be connected with. Now if you want the video for a particular planet in a particular sign in the Navamsa, do let me know in the comment section below. And this is how you will decode the Libra rising and the Aries sign falling in the 7th house of your D9 chart. Now let's move forward. Let's understand the Taurus sign in the 7th house of your D9. Now when you have Taurus sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, that is your D9 chart, basically you would be having a Scorpio rising in your D9 chart, Navamsa, right? So Scorpio sign is the rising from where your Navamsa starts. and the Taurus sign is falling in your 7th house. What kind of spouse you can expect with this Taurus sign is that the spouse is going to be very focused regarding financial accumulation. You know, they would not mind if it is done in your name or if it is done in their, but it will be very important for them that there should be ample amount of accumulation, hoarding of specifically wealth. Why? Because Venus is the Atmakaraka of the Navamsa chart. That is why the Taurus and the Libra will most importantly connect to the wealth perspective in the Navamsa other than anything, you know. Moreover, the Taurus sign also tells us that your spouse is going to have a kind of a elitism in there. And basically Taurus, because Taurus is a fixed sign, you would see that the loyalty and being very minimalistic kind of a thing is coming through because of elitism. So they will be very fond of minimalistic furniture or styles, because that is a new elite taste. This is what is going to happen, and specifically they will be loyal to you. How? Because they are having this particular thing in them that I cannot settle and I cannot intermingle with anyone out there in the world, you know, because I have my grounds, I have my standards and they are quite high. So I cannot be, going out with everyone. That is why, because of this particular thing, you can be free from this particular thinking about loyalty and determination and foundation in the marriage, which will not be shaken. This is something which is going to be present in their personality. Moreover, it will be very important for them. Somewhere or the other, family traditions would be manifesting as a very pivotal role in their life. It would be manifesting, be it in negative sense or in its positive sense. Maybe they would have been abandoned by their family long ago. This can also be a possibility. Or if the Venus is well placed in your Navamsa chart, then it can be something of a, because of their families, their existence, and it is everything which is dependent on their family, and they cannot bid adieu to their this particular traditions and their family philosophies and beliefs. So this is something which is going to be prominently present in their personality. Moreover, with this particular placement of the Taurus sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa, it is important that you check the placement of moon. Wherever the moon would be sitting in the Navamsa, in whatever sign, in whatever nakshatra, it would tell you a lot of things about your partner's personality, from where the elitism is coming in them. This elite nature is coming from where. So basically, if your moon is sitting in the Taurus sign in the 7th house, it shows that because they are coming from a very well-to-do family, that is why this elite nature in them is wealth backed. So this is something which you can decode from the placement of moon, and it becomes very important in the Navamsa chart because it would also be acting as a driving force in your married life. So the placement of moon should be extremely well, other than any planet, regarding your married life. Also in the D1, you should definitely check moon in the D1 chart also. So this is how you will decode the Taurus sign placed in the 7th house of your Navamsa. Let's move forward. Let's understand the placement of the Gemini sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Now when you have Gemini sign falling in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart, so first of all, the personality of your partner would be very communicative. They would want to talk. Communication would be the key for everything in their life, like be it a relationship, marriage, be it something with their children, bosses, with their co-workers, friends, or anywhere in the world. Communication is very, very important for them. So they would be this kind of a person. They would want to tell you everything when they come back from their office, or if you are the person earning and they are not, then they would want you to tell everything to them when you come back from the office. The second thing would be that with the Gemini sign in the 7th house, there is a kind of a presence that the social gatherings would matter a lot to them. They would specifically want to celebrate their festivals, their holidays with friends. They don't want to go on a solo trip. This is what the Gemini sign would manifest as. They would look young also, and they would have this humorous kind of a personality, and sometimes when they'll talk, it would represent that they are very immature or they are not very serious at times, but this is not so. If the Mercury is well placed, this is the kind of intellect they are having, that they know how to ease the pressure of a situation. This is the positive manifestation of Gemini which I am talking about. If the Mercury is not well placed, then opposite can also happen, that they do not know how to ease the pressure and they are joking in some situation where they should not do it, and it is taken as a not a very good thing in the society. So this is very important with this particular person. Moreover, they would be very curious also. Their mind would always be fond of knowing things and getting news and going to understanding the complex structures of the world. Even if they don't understand it, they would be fond of reading it at least. This is the kind of a personality you are going to be with. Specifically, this does not mean, because it is a Gemini sign, that they would be fond of reading books. They would be fond of reading anything, be it a social media post, or they would also be having a good social media presence too, but they would also be very fond of be connected with this trending channels or sources at social media. So this is a kind of a thing that they would be very hungry for knowledge. They would want to understand and know everything which is present on this planet Earth, which is under the sun. This is what is kind of a personality they have. Moreover, there is also a possibility about duality, because Gemini is a dual sign. What you can see is that they have distinctive kind of personalities at home and in their social life. So maybe they are this joking person, humorous person in the home. If the Saturn is present in the 7th house of your D1 chart, they would be very serious at their work front or in the society, in the public sphere. Or if there is more Mercury sitting in the 7th house of the D1 chart and Saturn sitting in the 7th house of your D9, it would then reverse, that they are more serious and they are more responsible in the home, and they are more humorous outside the home in the public life. So this is going to happen. They would have a dual kind of a personality. They will know how to adjust when and where. So this is the kind of personality you should expect out of the Gemini sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa. Now with this Gemini sign, actually it's a very good thing. If your Mercury is well placed or neutrally placed in the Navamsa chart, a lot of things would depend on your own free will and on your partner's free will, because no planet can here with the Gemini sign in the 7th house, no planet will affect your married life. The fate of your married life will not be affected by any planet. The amount of efforts you would put in, the amount of karma you would put in, the similar kind of results people would get out of it. So it's a good placement. If your Mercury is neutrally placed or well placed in the Navamsa in the D1 chart, then it's a good thing, because you will be putting in ample amount of good efforts and you would be getting ample amount of good results back too. But if it is not in that manner, things can go downhill. So it's important that you put ample amount of efforts in your married life with this Gemini sign in the 7th house, because the fate of your marriage is totally dependent on your free will and on your partner's free will. So this is how you decode the placement of the Gemini sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa. Let's move forward. Let's understand the placement of the Cancer sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Now when you have Cancer sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, that means that you are a Capricorn rising in your Navamsa chart. So what does this Cancer sign decode? How will your partner's personality would be affected by this Cancer sign? First of all, they would be a very emotional person. They would want to give it out to their children, to you, to nurture the family, and it's a good placement for the Cancer to be in the 7th house, be it for female or male, because everyone needs a caring spouse, and that is what your spouse is going to be. Moreover, the thing is that the Cancer sign is also very prominently connected to mother or mother figures. So somewhere or the other, either they are connected to their mother in a positive way or in a negative way. Both the things can be present. And if you have good relationship with your own mother, like they would help you out to sustain it or to continue it. If you yourself are not having good relationship with your own mother, they would be the one to make sure that you are at least emotionally feeling good from their side after the marriage. This is the kind of the manifestation of the Cancer sign in the 7th house. The partner ensures that you are nurtured, that you are cared for after the marriage, and it's a kind of a blessing actually. Moon has phases. So this is the kind of a personality you should expect out of your spouse, that they would also go through a cycle of phases every now and then, because would feel extremely well, extreme ecstasy at some point, at some day, and the other day they would be totally down. So this is a kind of personality, evolving, revolving kind of a personality which you have to expect out of your spouse. This is something which you have to steer with, because you are a Capricorn rising and you would be having and carrying the Capricornish values in your own personality. So so this is where you come in. You would be giving them that earthy environment, because Capricorn is a earth element sign. So this is something which they require from you, because they are going through phases in their personality. They are totally happy at some point in their life, and then they are totally down, and there is where they would need your help, because they are very sensitive, and they are very emotional. And if the moon is not well placed, the emotions can, the negative emotions can actually hurt them very badly. So this is important that you make sure that whenever they are experiencing any kind of negative emotion, you are present for them there, right? Moreover, with this Cancer sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa, for your spouse, home, comfort, peace and family protection, that feeling of fraternity in the family and that loving nature will be more important than social status. So this can come as a kind of a access or clash between you and your spouse, because for you it is social status, because for you it is public sphere, but for them it is all about home, comfort and peace in the inner world. So this is the kind of a personality which you should be expecting out of the Cancer sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa, you being Capricorn rising in the Navamsa. Also, you should check the placement of Venus and Moon in your Navamsa chart and in your D1 chart. These two planets will tell you a lot of things about your spouse's personality, their profession, their likes and their dislikes. So this is how you decode the placement of the Cancer sign in the 7th house of your D9 chart. Let's move forward. Let's understand the placement of the Leo sign in the 7th house of your D9. Now when you have Leo sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, that is, you are an Aquarius rising in your Navamsa. That is why Leo sign is in the 7th house of your Navamsa, right? So the personality of your spouse will be very authoritative, commanding, and they would treat them as a central figure in the most of the spheres in their life. So this does not mean that they are going to demean you in some way, because you are connected to them. This is their psyche is that, because they are authoritative, they are commanding and you are their spouse, so the people have to respect you as a couple. This is what their personality is going to be and their thinking is going to be like. Respect and prestige would matter a lot to them rather than the actual connectedness in the marriage. So if you are the person who is looking for nurturing, caring, inner peace and comfort in the marriage, that might come as a difficulty to you, because they want to strictly follow the hierarchy. There are parents, yours and mine, we have to respect them, and then we have to share and portray ourselves in a very respectable, dignified way in the society, in the public sphere, so that we both as a couple are respected by our juniors or people who are younger to us. So this is what is going to happen with the Leo sign in the 7th house. This is the central core of their personality. Now the thing is that authoritative, commanding nature can also be coming in from their profession, because of their profession. Moreover, the spouse and their personality will also be like that they would nudge you to make your self-expression more appropriate and more forthcoming. This is also their thing. They would want you to come into the spotlight, because now you are connected with them, so they would treat both of you as a single entity. This is a kind of also nature of the spouse whenever the Leo sign falls in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Moreover, if I have to be telling you about their beliefs and belief system, so it would be very fixed, whatever it will be it about anything which they are stern believer of, you will not be able to change it easily, and you should also not debate on all of these things with them, because it would not give you any kind of fruit, and if something is fruitless, then we should not be exerting our energy into it, So this is also a kind of a thing which you would see, a kind of a theme which you would see, that although they are commanding in nature, although they are authoritative, although they are more about prestige, respect in the outer world, in the outer sphere, public sphere, but they would treat you and them as a single entity, So it's like a thing like we have to sail together or we will drown together. This is the kind of mentality, this is the kind of psyche they would have, your spouse with the Leo sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa. Also, one major thing which you would see with this particular sign falling in the 7th house is that although your marriage and your married life will depend a lot on your free will and your spouse's free will, the way you react in given situation, the way you to put your efforts into this alliance, but with imbalance or with balance would also manifest, it would also largely affect your married life. So what does it mean? How you to balance out the fiery energy in yourself. So if you are Aries, moon in the D1, or if you are very fiery person in the D1 chart and in the D9 also, and you are having with imbalance, then the married life could also suffer. If your spouse is having imbalanced kind of a fiery energy in them, still the marriage could suffer. So it's important that you people, before getting married, make sure that both the partners are having balanced fiery energy in them. This is very important with this particular placement of the Leo sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa. Let's move ahead and let's understand the placement of the Virgo sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Now when you have Virgo sign in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart, what does that mean is that you are a Pisces rising in your Navamsa chart. That is why you have Virgo sign in the 7th house. So what this particular Virgo sign would manifest in the personality, how would this particular sign would manifest in the personality of your spouse is that the spouse would be very practical, and he or she is the person who is going to be connecting love, the love and the romance to the sense of service in the relationship. Because I am sharing responsibilities with you, because I am making your task easier, they are making your household chores or your day-to-day burden, they are sharing that burden which you are having. This is the sense of love and relationship for them. It's like that, they are very service oriented kind of a person. They want to help you out. They will give you practical solutions to almost everything. They will be very logical, and they will be very prone to be sticking to the daily routine. It would really distress them if you are late by 5 minutes or 15 minutes in your daily routine, that maybe you get up late by 15 minutes. So it would really distress them a lot. This is what is the basic personality you should expect out of your spouse. The other thing is that it is very important for you to understand that the idea of romance is something which is not present in them as it is portrayed in the world, because they are the practical ones, they are the logical ones. So it might be frustrating at some times, because you want that, you are a Pisces rising in your Navamsa and they are the pole opposite, which you have to steer through in this relationship. Moreover, the spouse, this can also be a very central point in their personality, that they'll be prone to worrying a lot. They'll be worried at almost all the times. They are worried about your expenses, or the day-to-day expenses, or the future of your children, or their own future, or wealth, or income, or something like that. Basically, this part of being worried all the times regarding something or the other which will be present in them, and then you have to be the person who have to steer them through this particular negative point in their personality. You have to make sure that you are there with them, and you are making sure that no, this is not something you should be worried about, and we'll take care of that, because we have to stay calm in most of the situations. This is what you have to make them understand. Moreover, with this Virgo sign in the 7th house of the Navamsa chart, you have to check Venus and Mercury's relationship in the Navamsa. You see, I'm not telling you about the placement. You should be checking their relationship to each other. How Venus and Mercury are manifesting in your Navamsa chart, how they are connected to each other as planets, and the third important planet with this particular position would be Saturn. Because wherever the Saturn would be placed in your Navamsa chart, that would define the this personality of your spouse up to much extent. So Saturn's position becomes very important with the Virgo sign falling in the 7th house of your D9 Navamsa chart. To decode the personality of your spouse, let's move forward. Let's understand the placement of the Libra sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa. So when you have the sign of Libra in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, so that would mean that you are a Aries rising in your Navamsa. Now when you have this particular sign in the 7th house, what it will tell about your spouse? First of all, the spouse is always about the, they are always about the we in the relationship, basically you and me. They do not take themselves as a single entity in the whole of the relationship. They are very diplomatic in nature, they are very graceful, they are a very balancing sort of a personality. They want to handle every situation of crisis in a very balanced way, in a very balanced manner. They want to talk out everything rather than impulsively acting on in any of the situation. Moreover, when the Libra sign is in the Navamsa chart and in the 7th house, they are the people, your spouse would be the person to compromise in every situation. They would be ready to do it because they have married you. This is what their thought process would be, and they will be the person to first say sorry to you. This is irrespective of whatever you are, be female or male chart, having Aries rising in the Navamsa. When you have Libra sign in the 7th house of the Navamsa, the person is going to apologize to you first, all the fights you have after marriage. So this is a very kind of a balancing nature of the partner which you have to expect out of them. They don't want to get into fight, they don't want to waste energy over anything which is of no use. They want to be productive, they want to move ahead with togetherness, with the feeling of togetherness, and they want to socialize in a very beautiful manner. So this is really something of a sign of a personality which is really expected out of the marriage. Basically this is the normal expectation of everyone, that the spouse should be understanding and they should possess a balanced nature which you are blessed with. The only problem is you, because you are Aries rising in the Navamsa chart. You will be impulsive, you will be quick to make your decisions, actions. That is why it is important that you have to be into some kind of sporty activity after you get married, because if your Martian energy is not exerted in any other way, then it might come straight directly to your spouse, which can ruin things, right? So it is important for you to take care of your impulsivity in yourself. Otherwise, you will never have any kind of problem from the side of the spouse. Moreover, whenever the Libra sign is in the 7th house of the Navamsa, you would also see that your partner is going to be a very beautiful person, be it female or male, whoever you are, Moreover, the person represents themselves very gracefully in a social gathering. They know how to communicate, what to speak, in what amount, in what tone. And so this is a kind of a very idealized kind of a personality you should be expecting your spouse to be. Basically you are having the personality which is very raw in nature. Spouse is someone who is extremely refined, so this is what is the equation would be after marriage, and that is a desired thing from your side. I don't know how your spouse would take your personality as, but this is something which is important, that creates the balance. That is what the yin yang is known to be about. Balancing is required for the nature, right? Moreover, with this particular placement of the Libra sign in the 7th house, you being Aries rising in the Navamsa, it is very important to check the placement of two planets in your D9 and the D1 chart. They are Saturn and Rahu. These two planets will tell you a lot about the personality of your spouse directly, their profession, their environment, their family background they are coming from. So Saturn and Rahu is very important to be analyzed in the Navamsa chart and in the D1. Check where it is placed, in what nakshatra, in what sign, in what house, and you'll get to know more about your spouse. Let's move forward. Let's understand the placement of the Scorpio sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Now, when you have Scorpio sign in the 7th house of your D9 chart, Navamsa chart, that would mean that you are a Taurus rising in the Navamsa. So, with the Scorpio sign, the personality of your spouse would be based specifically on some kind of psychological transformation. This can also mean that the spouse would bring a psychological transformation to your own personality after marriage. With the Scorpio rising, the pivotal point in their personality would be like inheritances, taxes or shared resources would have given them a significant experience in their life. So maybe they are living on inheritance till they meet you, and then after that marriage, because Scorpio sign is also the sustenance of marriage, the actual career starts for them. Or it could also be a thing that either they are doing tax evasion before marriage, or they were heavily taxed because of something, so they had some kind of problem or some positive experience with tax. So the thing is that wherever the Mars would go in your Navamsa would tell you which kind of experience they would have had. So if it is negatively placed, if it is compromised in the Navamsa, then the experience would have been negative. But if it is positively placed, the Mars is, then the experience would have been positive. But inheritance or taxes or some kind of shared resources, basically anything which was done in partnership, any business, any account which was in joint, it would have backfired to them if Mars is negatively placed. So the thing is that they would have this blot on their personality, this great influence on their personality regarding involving any of these three major karakas of the Scorpio sign. Moreover, this is the person, your spouse would be the person who would be very particular about secrets. They can maintain secrets in the married life also, but they would want you to respect the secrets of the marriage. It would really matter a lot to them that if they are sharing something in private to you, you have to keep the sanctity of that particular secret intact. You cannot go out there and share it to the world. My partner is having this trouble, or he told me this particular thing which was a secret between us, but now I have told you because of entertainment purposes. No, you cannot do this because it can ruin your marriage, because they are very particular about the secrets and that particular personal space which they will share with you after marriage. So this is the kind of personality. Yes, they would be very reserved, they would not talk very much, they will carry this unpredictable nature in their personality, but the person is very deep. They will crave for a deep relationship with you, and if the Mars is well placed, it can be formed after marriage. So this is the personality which you should expect out of this Scorpio sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, you being Taurus rising in the Navamsa. The most important planet with this particular sign in the Navamsa becomes Moon and Ketu. You have to check where the Moon and Ketu are placed in your Navamsa chart. It will tell you a lot about the personality of your spouse. Specifically, it's Ketu. Moon is the secondary planet, but specifically it's Ketu. It will tell you the positive side of your spouse actually. Moon you can use to decode the negative sides or some drawbacks the personality would be carrying. Specifically, the Ketu will also tell you about the profession of your spouse in the Navamsa chart. So this is how you decode the placement Scorpio sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, you being the Taurus rising. Let's move forward and let's understand the placement of the Sagittarius sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Now when you have Sagittarius sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, that would mean that you are a Gemini rising in the Navamsa, right? So how the Sagittarius sign would affect the personality of your spouse? First of all, would bring a difference in regards to culture, background, ethnicity, or in any form. There would be some kind of differences between you and your spouse. So maybe they are coming from the northern part of India and you are coming from the southern part. This is what it will show. So there would be this difference, there would be this distance between you and spouse. This is the first thing, right? Now the other thing would be that the difference could also manifest in the habits or in the personality or preferences, likes or dislikes. So maybe you are introvert but they are extrovert, like you are more humorous and they are more serious, and you are more jovial in nature and they are more traditional in nature. This is the kind of difference you might see with your own self in their personality, right? Now moreover, this particular Sagittarius sign would also unravel itself in terms that your spouse would need some space for themselves. So maybe they would build this study or this personal space in the home after marriage, so that they could spend some me time. It would be really very important for them, because somewhere or the other they would need that freedom, because Sagittarius sign shows freedom and this particularly space which the person wants. Moreover, the spouse's personality would also be very fond of traveling, and specifically they would want this marriage and this alliance to be directed towards a higher purpose. You people have very mundane reasons to be with each other that would hurt them. So if let's say, if you say that I wanted to settle into this particular city, that is why I am married to you, this statement would really hurt them. Even if you think that way, because you are more logical, you are more humorous, you have more jovial kind of a personality, which your spouse might also be, but they are only up to some extent. These things are not forming the core of their personality. The core is related to higher purpose, higher understanding, worldwide view. So they would want this particular alliance to be something of platonic in nature, that it was destined and both of us to be together, the way we met and all of these things. These are the things which would form the core of their personality. So it's important for you to not hurt that core, because let me tell you, with the Sagittarius sign, because it is a dual nature sign and it is the mool trikona of the Jupiter. Jupiter whenever rules the 7th house, somewhere or the other the wisdom can be shaken easily. It is not very rooted in the person. So it's important for you to take care of this particular fact, that you don't have to hurt their feelings in some manner which can ruin the relationship. Moreover, with the Sagittarius sign in the 7th house, you being Gemini rising in the Navamsa, the marriage for you will bring luck, energy and that spirit, that motivation to achieve something. That is something which is going to be happening for sure. Why is it happening? Because of the fact that the Jupiter is also ruling your 10th house in the Navamsa, which is the 7th lord. Your sign falling in the 10th house, Pisces sign, is actually the sign where Venus gets exalted, which is the Atmakaraka of the Navamsa chart. So it is very important for you to be taking advice from your spouse, to understand the worldwide view, even if it is of no use to your own self or to your own career. It would be very important for you to be driven by their wisdom. This is what is important. Specifically, you have to check the placement of the Jupiter in their chart, but if it is good placed, or if it is in a very well placed situation in the D1 and in the D9, then they are the person for you, because you need them. Moreover, I would say here, marriage or the fate of the marriage is not dependent on any key planet for you people. It is only based on the karma you would put into this particular marriage. So it is driven by this marriage. Whenever the Gemini and the Sagittarius sign are in the 1 or the 7th house of the Navamsa, it shows that you have an ample amount of free will in your marriage. The amount and the type of efforts you put in, the similar kind of results you would get back. So it's important that you manifest, you complete the karma of the marriage in a positive way with this particular Gemini rising in the Navamsa chart. Let's move forward and let's understand the placement of the Capricorn sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Now when you have Capricorn sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, that would mean that you are a Cancer rising in the Navamsa. Now what this particular Capricorn sign would tell you about your future spouse or your would-be spouse. The first and foremost thing would be that the relationship with this particular Capricorn sign in the 7th house is quite strong, and you know, the foundation of the marriage is going to be very solid with this Capricorn sign in the 7th house. It is unshakable. First of all, no matter what happens, what amount of fights you have, what amount of problems you go through as spouse, but separation is very last thing which would be on the minds of both you and your spouse, right? Specifically spouse, but you might have this particular you know, idea about separation, but this is not the option for your spouse particularly. The other thing is that spouse would want this marriage to be very stable and respected in the outer world, in the society, in the social, you know, sphere. So they want to appear with you in social gatherings and all the, you know, family gatherings, events, because they want that social attention for this particular marriage. Moreover, whenever the Capricorn sign is falling in the 7th house, there can be two things. Either your spouse is going to be older than you, or simply they would be mature. Moreover, with the Capricorn sign in the 7th house of the Navamsa, there is also one thing, that love and, you know, romance in the marriage, it is developed over time with the help of responsibility and respect. You know, so this is a kind of a thing which you have to, which you will get out of your spouse specifically, because for them idea of love is about sharing responsibility and respecting you, reciprocating similar kind of respect to them. That is what they understand as the love language. If you are a Sagittarius rising in the D1 chart with this particular Cancer rising in the D9, Capricorn sign in the 7th house, it becomes difficult for the people with this particular, you know, personality trait of their spouse, because they are not romantic types. They are more practical, they are more grounded, they are more stable, and they are more logical. But you people, because you are freedom oriented, traveling oriented, you are more adventurous, and you are very emotional. You want to express the emotional self out of yourself to the spouse. But this is what spouse, you know, is very, they have difficulty expressing their emotional expression in the marriage. There is where it can become difficult. Moreover, with this particular placement, it is very important for you to understand that this stable ground, it does not come with the marriage itself. Like on the first day, the spouse would tell you that, you know, we are not going to separate in our lifetime and we would die being married to each other. This is not going to happen. This is the sign which is ruled by Saturn only, and the Saturn requires time. You'll have to put in a lot of effort and time into the marriage to build that kind of stable ground. So that is, you know, the marriage would require a very extreme patience from your side. You will be tickled by this moon because it is giving the 7th aspect on your Lagna, but somewhere or the other you would steer through this particular, you know, you would give ample amount of time into the relationship. Moreover, with this Capricorn sign in the 7th house, what you have to check is the two planets which are key planets which you have to analyze in your chart. They will tell you a lot about the personality of your spouse, are Sun and Mars. The Sun and Mars are going to be very defining regarding the personality of your spouse. You have to check where they are placed, in what signs, in what nakshatras, in the Navamsa, in the D1 chart, and from there you would get a lot about the personality, about the profession, about the understanding how the person, the would-be spouse, would behave in this particular alliance, in this particular marriage. So this is how you decode the placement of the Capricorn sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Let's move forward. Let's understand the placement of the Aquarius sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Now, when you have Aquarius sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, that would mean that you are a Leo rising in your Navamsa. So the personality of your spouse could be decoded in the terms that they would be a kind of they would maintain a friendly relationship with you after marriage. They would want to be your friend so that you can come out to them very easily and with freedom. This is not some kind of a, you know, hierarchical structure they would want to work in, that, you know, we have our responsibilities and we have our duties to fulfill in this marriage and we should be acting like mature adults. This is not the personality you should be expecting out of your spouse. They would be very friendly, they would be very fun loving, and they would want to indulge in your own social circle. They would want you to indulge into their own social circle. So, you know, intermingling with the social circle and, you know, having fun out there in the world, which would be making a very central point to their personality. Somewhere or the other, your spouse's personality and their life will be impacted by large organizations, social circles, or technology. Somewhere or the other, you would see that they are heavily impacted by any of this particular element in their life. They might be working in this particular environment, or they are, obsessed with technology. All of these, any of these things can happen basically with the Aquarius sign in the 7th house. There is also one thing, that the spouse would be very logical and they would want to solve every problem. The solution to every problem for them is basic logic. With this Aquarius sign in the 7th house, they will be hardworking. They know, this is their mantra, that if you won't work hard, you will not achieve anything in the life. But with the hardworking, some amount of relaxing and having fun is also important. So they are the perfect mixture of what you can think of a professional guy with a good amount of work-life balance. This is what you can expect out of them. One more thing which can come as a drawback in their personality would be that they would not be very willingly to share their emotional side to you. They would want to maintain that particular perfect space for you to come out even in the emotional times when you are going through, when you are dealing with your extreme emotions. But they would themselves find very challenging to speak similar kind of things to you. So emotionally they might be very difficult. You would have to nudge them to ask or to know what happened with them, why they are hurt or why they are down. But specifically, this is the only thing which you can think of as a drawback in their personality. Moreover, they would also challenge the traditional views of you and the other people out there in the world. This is also a kind of a thinking in them. Basically their thinking would be developed over rationality, rational thinking and scientific temperament. This is what is going to drive them towards. But the thing is that traditional views and logic behind is very difficult for them to understand. This is what is going to make the central personality of your spouse. With this particular Aquarius sign in the 7th house, let me tell you, you being Leo rising, it is going to be very dependent on the free will of both the partners, you and your spouse, how you will manage each other's personality. Because you are ruled by Sun, they are ruled by Saturn. So this particular combination is something about how you will perceive each other, how you will cater to each other's needs. This is what is going to set the tone and the environment of the married life. So you have to be very particular about this thing before marriage, that make sure whatever are the things which you want out of your, or which you expect out of your spouse, are fulfilled, and similarly ask them what they want out of their marriage and out of you, so that these things, they do not form the core issue after getting married. So this is how you decode the placement of the Aquarius sign in the 7th house of your D9 chart. Let's move forward. Let's understand the placement of the Pisces sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Now when you have Pisces sign falling in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart, that would mean that you are a Virgo rising in the Navamsa. This particular placement, the spouse might be involved in some kind of healing or artistic practices, be it profession wise or in maybe this is what forms their interest, be into spiritual learning or artistic learning. With this Pisces sign in the 7th house of the Navamsa, you would also see that there are very thin boundaries in the relationship. Somewhere or the other, you would see that your spouse knows when you are out of your mind, or when you are hurt, when you are happy, and they would directly ask you that why are you feeling so happy today, or why are you feeling so sad today, even when you don't tell them and you have just entered the home. So this is what the spouse is going to be like, because they'll feel you, they will feel the emotions inside you. With the Pisces sign in the 7th house, this is a very prominent trait in the personality of the spouse. They would want to know everything which is going in your life, and they would want you to listen everything which is going in their life, and it will make a very important, like a prominent component in the marriage from their side. Like this is something which is non-negotiable. We have to do this. This is something of a kind of a thinking for them. Now you have to tell me what is going in your life, and I will tell you what is going in mine. Simply. Specifically with the Pisces sign in the 7th house of the Navamsa, marriage is, whatever happens in the married life, it is simply out of your control. It is out of your control, and it is totally destined. You don't know where this particular thing would go. So it's better that you steer with your spouse in that particular destiny, because if you start fighting it, that I don't want this particular thing, I want this particular thing to be in this manner, and this should be corrected, this should be fixed, then you are inviting problem, because you are vulgarizing, and I expect these things from you, from your own personality after marriage. So it's important that you don't fix things, because it is not going to help you in any manner, right? It might ruin the relationship. So it's better that you go with flow, and things are already destined for you. You just have to go, you just have to deal with it as they come to you. Moreover, the thing is that whenever the Pisces sign is in the 7th house, the spouse is not very practical, and they hate to be practical. They want to be in their eternal imaginative world. They would say that, if we would have bought a home in this particular city, in this particular expensive city, then we would have visited this particular place together regularly. Now then you would say that how is it possible, we can't afford that particular city, it's very expensive. They would say, no, just imagine if we would have done it. So this is the kind of personality you should expect out of your spouse, and it's important that you go on that particular imaginative journey when they ask you to, because the 12th house or the Pisces sign is the sign of escapism. Maybe this is the thing. It might be a thing in their childhood or in their life before getting married, that they would have developed this particular escapism as something, a soothing therapy of their own. So it's important that you don't be, you don't overdo the logical explanations in the marriage, and you just steer with them. You just try to understand what they are telling you, to be in a moment, right? To be in that imaginative eternal world for just a moment, and you can do that for their happiness. This is something which you have to learn. This is a karmic lesson which you will be coming in with the marriage, with the event of marriage in your life. Now this does not mean that they would be totally delusional, no, because you are there to take them back to the reality. But it's important that you respect whatever their personality is, and whatever traits are forming the core of their personality. They want to talk good, and you should be doing it, even if it is not practically possible at that moment in your life, at that time in your life. So this is how you would decode the placement of the Pisces sign in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Moreover, with this Pisces sign in the 7th house of the Navamsa, you have to check the placement of Venus and Mercury in the Navamsa and the Sun. Wherever they are placed, these three planets are placed, be it in a compromised state, be in a good state, you would have to check it. It would tell you a lot about the personality of your spouse in more detail, in a more refined way, and their profession, their environment, their home environment, or what you can expect out of the marriage and this alliance with this person is something which would be decoded by these three planets, specifically in the D9 and also in the D1. So this is how you decode the sign placed in the 7th house of your Navamsa chart. Do let me know in the comment section below what other topics you would want me to make videos on, and I would specifically be working on them. And if you found the video interesting, do not forget to like the video and share it with your friends and family. Please do subscribe Galactic Echoes Astrology for more such amazing content.